Hello, Julie.
Hello, Sarah.
Welcome to Planetary Pictures.
It's good to be here.
It
I'm
is,
always in planetary pictures.
and finding our way through these new moon eclipses, eclipse season. Then
And the morass of the world,
that is a good word for it. Yeah. And
the fire swamp. We're in the fire swamp, eh?
yeah, I mean, could you have seen what was coming with that last new moon that happened? What day was it? It was
The new moon was on the 14th. It was an eclipse. So the attack in Israel was on the 7th, I think. And
okay,
people kept asking me, can you see when it's going to end? And I had the same response for everyone. Wait until the new moon.
right.
New moon's in Libra. Libra is a sign of conflict. Eclipses are about the nodes. Nodes are in Libra and Aries, conflict.
Yeah. Because the nodes in the signs of Aries and Libra are the signs of war, basically, right? That's what they indicate.
Yeah,
So,
going at it.
right. So you mentioned before we started recording about October 7th when the attack happened, what that was. Do you want to share that?
Well, there's a couple of striking things to
Yeah.
be, punny, I guess, about it. One is that um, Venus was retrograde, right?
Talked about
And Venus goes retrograde and it goes direct. But before it goes retrograde, there's a shadow coming in where it covers all the degrees. And then after it goes direct, it's still following the shadow of all the degrees it's covered.
right.
So the day of the attack was the very last day of the shadow when Venus was conjunct the degree where she made the station in July.
Right.
And that degree happens to be conjunct the Mars of Israel.
Wow.
And I don't think you can separate Israel, at least not from Gaza. Like the chart is the same, right? So
So Israel and Gaza would have the same chart?
I think they
Yeah.
do. I mean, there are people who say, you can have a different chart for Hamas, but then you could have a different chart for any governing body. But the country of Israel was born on May 14th, 1948. And that's when I mean, I know there's an earlier date for partitioning, and that maybe would be the date we could use. But I haven't even looked, I wrote it down. I meant to look at it, but I think that Israel and Gaza are
They were created on,
found around the chart of
right.
Israel's birthday.
Okay.
So Venus, when it's the morning star, which it is now, I hope everyone's been out there looking at it, is about going to war. It's Venus determined, right? It's much more, and apparently the Mayans thought of it as a god of war when Venus was the morning star. Or someone, I'm not an expert on that. I've just heard that. But there is definitely, when Venus goes retrograde and then comes back up as the morning star, she's definitely more determined and directed as the morning star. So it's interesting that her parting shot, so to speak, was a conjunction with Mars in the chart of Israel.
Mhm.
And when Israel was born, Mars was squaring the sun in Taurus.
Mm.
So that's a very difficult square, in that Mars is aggression and the sun is will, and they're squaring each other. So it's like there's a kind of belligerence in that, I should know. And I remember we did a workshop for women with Mars square the sun.
Yes, I attended as I
That's right. We did that workshop just for
we are Marzi
elected.
Square
Yes,
Sun women. Yes.
that's right. Because we know that as hard as patriarchy is, it's just a little bit harder for women with a Sun Mars square. So
And
Israel isn't a
what would
woman
you
or a
say,
man,
because
it's a
there's so
country.
much tension and will and uh will force combined
Wilforce, yeah.
with aggression. Yeah.
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 So, I was telling you about how this morning when I woke up, I didn't want to get out of bed. And then suddenly I said to myself, God damn, I'm getting out of bed. Nobody's going to keep me in this bed. Screw
Yeah.
you all. Yeah, it wasn't that exactly those words, but close, worse. Anyway, so that's the Sun Mars square, right? I'm not taking it. So Israel was born with a Sun Mars square. What can I say? Venus was conjunct the Mars of Israel, and Uranus, planet of revolution, revelation, big time change, was conjunct Israel's sun, has been and was conjunct Israel's, and
Like
is
during this transit,
continuing.
or
Yeah,
yeah, this is what's happening now in the chart. Yeah.
that's right. So it didn't just happen. Venus happened on that day. Uranus has been hanging around since June.
Okay. Okay. So there's Venus energies kind of floating around. It was born with the Mars Sun square, which you and I know well. A lot of will force, and then these later aspects of Venus conjunct the Mars, and Uranus conjunct the Sun. They've been floating around in the whole Venus retrograde, when it was coming out of shadow, just kind of kicked things into gear.
Right. So people are really angry that Israel missed the signs that, like, they had the intel, they could have known whatever. And it's really, I mean, I have no opinion on this because I'm just a lowly astrologer, but it's interesting that Uranus specifically is expect the unexpected, right? When all astrologers, when they see a Uranus transit, say, well, expect the unexpected. You don't know what's going to happen. Could be good,
Yes.
could be bad, but it's going to be not what you expected.
Yes.
And so it's interesting that Uranus was in this picture and had been in the picture for months. So the information they had probably was hard to
Decipher.
decipher because they were expecting the unexpected.
Right. So maybe
Or
they were,
they,
yeah.
I don't know. They probably don't have an astrologer, although they should. Maybe they do actually. But anyway, an unexpected attack is not that surprising because the son of Israel is in the chart in the seventh house of people who attack you or challenge you or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
Yeah.
then there was the other part of it was that Mars was very close to the ascendant of Israel on that day.
Right. Right. Yes. Mars in Libra, right?
Mhm.
Which is also Mars being the ruling planet of Aries, known for the sign of initiating and aggressing in one side of the spectrum. Can be assertiveness. It's not necessarily bad, but it can be the aggressor, and it can be war. It can be fights. Yeah.
Right. So Mars in Libra, conjunct Libra rising, ruled by Venus,
Right.
and Venus conjunct Mars.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's quite a picture. It's quite a picture. You don't need to dive into deep subtleties to see the picture. And, then, I mean, what good is astrology? It didn't keep this from happening. I don't know what good astrology is. You could see the minute the nodes went into Aries and Libra, you could see that we're marching to war on this planet. Why do we have to do that? How come we've forgotten how to negotiate?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, it's not just what's happening in the Middle East. It could be anywhere like it's happening in the
It
world.
is. It's happening on so many places. But the Middle East captures everybody's imagination in the Western civilized, so to speak, in the uncivilized Western world,
Yeah.
because it's like the belly button of Western civilization is the
It's a
Holy Land or whatever. Yeah.
cradle. That's where it rose out
It's
of.
some kind of cradle. And, the Crusades never ended, apparently.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
the
even though this isn't about Christians, um, it's the Western dominance. There's so many themes in the Western civilized world that Israel and the Holy Land represents. So I think everybody, I got an email from someone saying, so Armageddon.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I think it does hit deeply into the foundations of our civilization. And so that's
Yeah.
why people feel the deep effect of it, even if you're not there, or, of that
Right.
origin. So,
Right. And it doesn't mean that the war in Russia shouldn't be also something that we're thinking about, but Russia is Russia,
mhm.
right? It doesn't have that um yeah, it doesn't have that Western civilization tone to it exactly. It's not quite as powerful. It's just as horrible though.
Yes, it's just as horrible, but it doesn't have the same roots. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. So as we move into we've had the new moon, the eclipse. Venus has come out of shadow in its powerful way with the left hook.
Now it's in Virgo. It's gone.
Yeah,
It's Venus said, "See ya."
Venus did her thing. And the new moon and the eclipse happened, and then we have the full moon coming up. The full moon in Taurus. Is that correct? Yeah, because we're entering into Scorpio season, and that will bring the full moon into Taurus. What do you
So,
see?
so the full moon is at 5 degrees of Taurus, which is early Taurus, but it's still an eclipse. It's still close enough to the nodes that it's an eclipse, even though
Oh,
it's in the different sign. Yeah.
wow. Okay. Can you explain that? So, because the moon is 4 degrees of Taurus, it's close enough to the nodes, which are in Aries,
5 degrees.
5 degrees.
Yeah. So the phenomenon of eclipses is so fascinating. The reason we have eclipses, if you remember from class, is that the sun is 400 times farther from the earth than the moon, and the moon is 400 times closer, smaller than the sun. So it's like this coincidence, synchronicity, that the sun being 400 times farther and 400 times bigger means that from the perspective of the earth, the moon looks like it's the same size as the sun.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's beautiful, actually, is what it is.
Ah,
And it won't always be that way. The moon is always moving tiny bits away from the earth. But an eclipse happens. So every month we have a new moon when the sun and the moon conjunct each other, but the sun and the moon can be in the same zodiac degree and not in the same plane, right? They can both be going around the zodiac, and they're both at 14 degrees of Libra. But when there's an eclipse, they're also in the same plane. And so the shadow of the one blocks out the view of the other,
okay.
right? So in a solar eclipse, which is what we had, the shadow of the moon gets between Earth and the sun, so the sun disappears.
Okay.
And in a lunar eclipse, the Earth gets between the sun and the moon, and so the moon disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And the moon doesn't quite disappear, and the sun can disappear almost. There can be little bits of it, but we have total eclipses anyway too. So, I mean, it's funny. So you could say that when it's a lunar eclipse, which is coming on the 28th of October, it's like having your kid get between mommy and daddy, right? So no, don't fight.
Yeah.
But full moons are oppositions, right? There's always a challenge in them.
Yeah.
This next full moon, this next lunar eclipse that's coming on October 28th at 4:24 p.m. So we won't see it. It won't be dark enough to see it. Might see a little bit of it. Anyway, can take a while. But what's interesting is that 5 degrees of Taurus is where Jupiter is going to make a station at the end of December.
Okay.
So this degree is a bit of a hot degree because Jupiter is going to sit there for 2 months,
Okay.
and in the not too distant future.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that interesting. And on the day of the lunar eclipse, the sun and Mars and Mercury in Scorpio will oppose Jupiter.
Oh,
So it's a lot. So Jupiter, you can read, if you go to my insights, you can read me trying to put this in a little, short thing. But it's kind of the themes of Taurus and Scorpio are very, very strong. You've got the Sun and Mars and Mercury in Scorpio opposing something powerful in Taurus.
right.
So the theme of Taurus and Scorpio isn't finished.
Yeah, because
And
so much has been happening in Taurus with Uranus and Jupiter, and
that's right.
like this is and uh like for a long time it's been happening, but Taurus and Scorpio are the fixed power signs, so they're really about like who's in power, who's holding on to power,
And they're about resources.
and resources. Yeah.
They're also about loss. Like
Yeah.
Scorpio is about all the dead souls, right? Being pulled into the underworld. And Taurus is about all the things you won't let go of.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So even though, so in the world, the that eclipse feels to me like it's setting off things that are going to take till January to settle down. And I think there are going to be things about food supply and resource supplies and winter in the north. People, I mean, there's earthquakes. I heard that in BC they're having earthquake drills
Oh,
because it's not if we have an earthquake, it's when we have an earthquake, right? And so there's all this stuff about resources, and it's it's a bit intimidating to look at.
yeah.
But I think for individuals, you have to think about it in terms of what your own life is about. So and that's how I try and write my insights. Is like, what is it that you're holding on to that if you let go of it, it might allow you to move more easily through the coming months.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting because the opposite signs, like Taurus and Scorpio, are kind of like the opposite sides of the same coin. So they're seemingly opposite,
Yeah.
but they're of the same theme, right? So like as you mentioned, Taurus is about accumulating and holding on and building, and like it's land, it's the earth, it's like it's a mass.
Stuff. It's food.
It's tough,
Yeah.
right? And then Scorpio is about death and learning how to let go and transform and become something different. Although
Scorpio is about the fact that if you never let go, there's nothing can happen. It's like pooping. You have to empty your bowels, or you can't keep eating.
right. It's
That's
the
the
not
wisdom of
fun part
Scorpio.
though. It's the not
Huh?
fun part. It's the
No, it's
fun
stinky
part.
stuff. But it's amazing how much aversion we have towards the inevitable need of letting go. And then we act it out by murdering each other. Like, go figure.
Mhm.
It's almost like you could say humans are so anxious about death that they have to kill each other
Just to get it over with.
just to get it over with. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I read an interesting article that someone sent me about the age of Pisces being the age of religion, because Pisces is a sign of blind faith, right? Just faith in. And that Aquarius, of course, will be the age of science. And that here at the end, of that transition, like where the two are starting to really meet. And the guy who wrote I think, I don't know if it's a guy, but the person who wrote the article made a case for the fact that it's been about 700 years since we've been in the third stage of the age of Pisces. I got it. I thought it was smart. That there's no doubt that reason will triumph, but the age of Pisces doesn't want to let go. So there's kind of a holy war thing going on,
Right.
right? That's very intense, but Aquarius will inevitably triumph. There's no doubt about it.
Because we know that the age of Aquarius is
Coming.
coming, we're kind of in it. It's like the end. It's
We're not in it. We're not in it. We're still at the end of the age of Pisces. It takes longer to transition than you would like, but I think
because
the
it's a
crux of the
2,000 year cycle,
transition,
right? Like it's a 2,000 year cycle. So it's not just
yeah,
next.
it's 2,160 years.
Okay.
And I think that the transition, I think Pluto in Aquarius, that over the next 20 years is probably taking us into it. And there's a lot of choices we have to make if science is going to be, if science and reason is going to be the next 2,000 years, we have to decide what to do with AI and what to do with all the people who don't trust the medical world. Um, um, we have to deal with the reasons why people don't trust that.
Yeah.
But we're off to a very bumpy start because we're still doing the Age of Pisces stuff. That it's hard to get a beat on it. It's hard to get traction into the Age of Aquarius because we're still strangled by the death throes of the Age of Pisces.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a formidable challenge, right? To that we can already all feel about, like, and you've mentioned many times about reckoning with science in terms of AI medicine, not becoming an algorithm, and not losing humanity, over technology, because we need
Yeah, I just got a new phone. Which is a very minor thing in a person's life. That phone is trying to turn me into a machine.
Yes. How so?
It's way beyond the phone I had because I held on to that phone for a long time. It interrupts me. It asks me questions I didn't ask for. It's constantly trying to railroad me into paying attention to it when I don't wanna.
Yeah.
Consequently, I am paying a lot less attention to it overall, which means I'm missing a few texts and things. But it's like, wow, it's an assault on my brain, actually.
Yes, I feel that with my phone as well. Like, it's making me ADHD, my phone. I wasn't
Yes,
before. And now
it's
I am.
trying to.
It's trying to,
It's
because
trying to.
I'll be
Yeah.
doing one thing, something else will come through, and then I'll be, scattered, and then do that, and then I'll forget what I was doing. And then you've got all these little things dancing around trying to get your attention. I'm like, how is this helpful for my brain? Yeah.
It isn't helpful. It's very degenerative. And I have to put it aside. I have to turn it off at 9 o'clock every night. And I have to leave it. I put it on low. I don't always hear it. A lot of things.
Yeah.
I have to master it. I cannot let it master me. But it's a very imminent or immediate experience of the Age of Aquarius trying
Yes.
to.
Yeah. Systemize. Yeah. Yes, so that is definitely a challenge that we're all looking at as we enter, for sure. And I could go off into many places asking questions, but I think we'll stay with the full moon. Come back to the full moon that's happening. And then there's another new moon, of course, after that, 2 weeks later, November 7th, I believe you said.
Yeah, and that that new moon. Let's get that new moon. Let's see here. That new moon is on the 13th of November, and it's right close. It's not. It's about 5 days after the exact midpoint between the equinox and the solstice. Right, it's the exact midpoint of autumn. It's a very powerful point. So 5 days before that, so around the 7th, 8th of November. And it's when Halloween should be. So it's Samhain, people who witches do Samhain, but Halloween is taken from the fact that it's supposed to be the midpoint between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice.
Right.
So there's 4 power points in the year, and that's one of them. And so that new moon comes after that. It comes after that. But the new moon is in Scorpio, conjuncting Mars in Scorpio and opposing Uranus. So Mars will oppose Uranus on the 11th exactly. The new moon on the 13th picks that energy up. It's carrying that energy. A very challenging new moon, not an eclipse, but it's got Uranus and Mars in it.
Which had
So
the elements like that the full moon is having, as you were saying, right? It's got Mars, it's got Uranus, Scorpio, Taurus themes. So
right, it's got those themes.
right, and we talked about Mars being, can be an aggressor, can be more war, can be fighting. And Uranus, as you mentioned, is surprise, big explosions and not expected surprises, pleasant or otherwise.
My sense of Uranus in Taurus is it's like the wrecking ball. It's like a wrecking ball that's just swinging back and forth and wrecking the economy and climate, and it's like, whoa, no kidding.
Right. Yeah. So lots of letting go happening in the next little while. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of letting go, but really on a personal level, looking at what it is, what happens when you're fearful, because we're all fearful right now, and you relax your shoulders and you take a breath and you do some movement. What happens when you do that? Like, where are you? Where do you go? How does the same thing register with you?
Right.
Because it's easy to obsess. It's easy to just, keep reading or listening or watching
Yeah.
what's happening. And it's really an assault. It's really an assault. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it's talking to, people and just like the being here in Canada in the West and watching, what's happening or listening to what's happening, and then the PTSD that arises in some people. And also, there's the events that happen, and then there's how the events are handled, which are like insult on top of injury. And the goal, we do have the privilege of having some space and distance to how not to continue the trauma, how not to allow your nervous system and allow the fear to perpetuate the trauma, right? How to work through it when you have some distance, so that you can be a calm and reasonable human.
All right.
And
how to do that without turning your back on it and pretending it's not happening.
Exactly, so that you can still care and you can still be in relationship with it, but without the trauma response. That's the only way through for all of us.
And that's what Scorpio says.
What's that?
That's what Scorpio says. That's the only way through. Don't kid yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So sending prayers to everybody on the earth.
And the earth itself. I mean, it's such a shitty thing to do to the earth, to send bombs at it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to speak to it because it's a big thing that's happening on the planet, but not because I know the righteous way through it or anything like that, right? I leave each person to their own way of witnessing such powerful and difficult things.
Okay, I think that's a good place to end.
Okay. All right.
So we'll see you next month.
All right. I'll hope to be here.
Take care.